Olympic National Park, a vast wilderness where old-growth forests rise like cathedral pillars, where mist curls around moss-draped branches, and where silence itself feels alive. When 27-year-old Mark Reeves vanished within its borders in the summer of 2019, searchers thought it would be another routine case of a hiker straying from the trail. But as hours bled into days, and days into weeks, the park revealed nothing, not a boot print, not a scrap of clothing, not even a broken twig to suggest which way he had gone. It was as if the forest had swallowed him whole. The search effort in the first week, more than 50 search and rescue volunteers combed the dense woods. Helicopters hovered above the tree line, their blades cutting the mist as infrared scanners swept the canopy for any sign of heat. On the ground, dogs were brought in. Their handlers watched anxiously as the animals sniffed Mark's jacket, hoping to catch a scent. At first, they pulled hard toward a narrow game trail leading deeper into the backcountry. But halfway in, they stopped. They circled, and then nothing, as if the scent had dissolved into the trees. One handler later admitted in a report, "It was like chasing a ghost. One second, the dogs were certain, the next it was as though the trail ended in thin air." Family, his younger sister Anna, his mother Rebecca, and his father James set up camp near the ranger station, refusing to leave until answers came. Anna recalled seeing her brother last, a wide smile under his scruffy beard, a heavy backpack slung across his shoulders, and that carefree laugh he carried everywhere. He had texted her that morning. "Signals going out. If you don't hear from me in 2 days, assume I'm drinking creek water and chasing elk. Don't worry." But now, 2 weeks later, the words felt haunting. Rebecca walked into the ranger's office daily, her voice breaking as she asked the same question. "Have you found anything yet?" The rangers could only shake their heads. Whispers among rangers behind closed doors. Rangers debated the situation. Olympic National Park had seen missing persons before, but Mark's case unsettled even the veterans. One ranger, Tom Dwyer, had worked there for 19 years. He told colleagues, "Normally, we find something, a boot, a pack, a campfire ring. This, nothing. It's like he walked into the trees and vanished." Another ranger, quieter, muttered something that chilled the room, or like something took him. The silence that followed was heavier than the mist outside. Theories began to spread as the official search wound down. After 14 days, theories erupted both inside the park and online. Some believed Mark had gotten turned around in the thick undergrowth, wandered into a ravine, and succumbed to exposure. The park's unforgiving terrain was more than enough to end a life. Others thought he might have staged his disappearance, an escape from the pressures of modern life, a decision to go off-grid forever. But there were darker theories too. Locals whispered about feral people living deep in the mountains, unseen by casual hikers, a shadow population who could have stumbled across Mark. Others whispered of something older, something woven into the roots of the park itself. Anna, meanwhile, refused to believe any of it. "My brother loved the outdoors. He wasn't reckless. If he was gone, then something happened to him. Something none of us understand." A chilling encounter 1 month after the search had been called off. A pair of backpackers hiking near Bogashill Peak came into the ranger station with a disturbing account. Around midnight, while camped on a ridge, they swore they had heard a man's voice calling out from the forest below. It was faint, but desperate. "Help, help me," the two shouted back, flashing their headlamps into the trees. But the voice never answered. It only repeated the same plea, softer each time, until it faded into silence. Rangers scoured the area the next day. Once again, nothing. But for Anna, the story relit the spark of hope. What if Mark was still alive? What if he was trapped, injured, waiting for rescue? Her mother begged her not to think that way. But Anna couldn't shake the thought. The wilderness was hiding something. The dark history of Olympic National Park. Journalists picked up the story. Old cases resurfaced. Olympic National Park, it turned out, had a long history of disappearances. In 1997, a solo backpacker was last seen near the Solduck River. His pack was later found at an abandoned campsite. He was never recovered. In 2006, a couple hiking along the Hoh Rain Forest vanished without a trace. Their tent was discovered, zipped shut, food untouched. And in 2011, a biologist conducting a survey disappeared during a routine day hike. His equipment was found stacked neatly by the trail. He was gone. The parallels were undeniable. Each time, no remains, no explanation, no closure. Locals began to say the park was cursed. A place where the land itself decided who stayed and who returned. Mark's Camara then came the most unsettling development of all. 2 months after his disappearance, a hiker stumbled upon something unusual near the banks of the Quinault River. A small, mud-caked digital camera. When turned in, investigators realized it was Mark's. Inside, the memory card was intact, and the photos told a chilling story. The first dozen shots were ordinary. Wide shots of waterfalls, selfies at the trailhead, panoramic views of the mountains. Mark smiling, alive, vibrant. But the last 3 were different. The first showed a blurry image of trees at night, as though the camera had been yanked suddenly. The second was stranger, faint white figure in the distance, half obscured by the mist. The third was nearly black, except for a pale shape close to the lens. Something that looked disturbingly like a face. After that, the camera cut off forever. The internet reacts when word of the photos leaked. The internet exploded. Forums filled with theories. Some claimed the white figure was simply mist catching. The flash. Others insisted it was proof of something supernatural. Someone stalking Mark in the woods. For Anna, seeing those images was devastating. The last record of her brother alive, and possibly in the presence of something unknown. She whispered through tears. He was scared. You can see it. He saw something, and it was coming for him. Foreshadowing the truth, by the fall of 2020, more than a year after Mark vanished, hope had dwindled. His case had joined the long list of unsolved disappearances haunting Olympic National Park. But then, just as the family prepared for another agonizing anniversary, biologists deep in the backcountry stumbled across something that would shatter every theory and force the world to confront the unexplainable. The Olympic National Park is one of the most haunting landscapes in North America, a place where dense, moss-draped trees stretch endlessly toward the sky, where fog clings to the ground in pale fingers, and where rivers, icy and unpredictable, carve deep scars through the wilderness. It is a place where people go to test themselves against nature's raw power, and sometimes it's a place where people disappear. The vanishing it was April 5, 2017, when 22-year-old Jacob Gray pedaled away from the town of Port Townsend, Washington. He wasn't running from anything, not in the way you might imagine. When hearing a story like this, he was running towards something, an adventure, an escape into the unknown, a test of his endurance and spirit. Jacob was a dreamer. Friends and family often described him as restless, a soul pulled by the gravity of wilderness. He wasn't content with city streets or predictable routines. He wanted something raw, something real. That spring, he packed his bicycle with a small trailer filled with camping supplies, sleeping bag, food, cooking gear, even a bow and arrows. His goal, to ride out into the Olympic Peninsula, camp alone in one of the most unforgiving and beautiful environments in America, and live by his own strength. No one knows exactly what was going through his mind that day as he pedaled along the Salt Duck Hot Springs Road. The cold mist rolling down from the mountains, his tires cutting across damp pavement, glistening from rainfall. But by the next morning, Jacob was gone. The bicycle on April 6th, campers driving along Salt Duck Road spotted something strange. At the side of the road, leaned neatly against a moss-covered embankment, was a bicycle with a small attached trailer. The trailer was loaded with camping gear, bags still zipped tight, food intact, bow and arrows resting on the side. But there was no rider. The scene wasn't one of chaos, no overturned equipment, no tire marks suggesting a crash, no sign of a struggle. Everything was positioned almost too neatly, as though its owner had simply stepped away for a moment and never returned. Even stranger, rangers later noted, were the arrows. Several had been carefully stuck into the back of the trailer, pointing outward like warning signs or strange markers. His water gear was missing his camelback and water filter butt. Jacob himself had vanished. The first response ranger, John Bowie, was among the first to respond. He knew immediately that something wasn't right. Most campers or cyclists leave gear scattered in perfect, human messes. But this felt staged, almost frozen in time. Bowie radioed the situation, and soon another ranger, Brian Ray, was dispatched to verify the scene. When Ray arrived, he too was struck by the eerie calmness of it all. A lone bike, a loaded trailer, no human dot, just silence. The family was alerted, and a search effort quickly began. The search within 48 hours. A team of nearly 30 people, rangers, mountain rescue volunteers, and tracking experts spread across the Salt Duck area. At first, they found faint traces, footprints leading away from the road toward the Salt Duck River. Oddly, Jacob appeared to have changed shoes somewhere along the way, boot prints, giving way to running shoe tracks. That was unusual. Why swap footwear in rugged terrain unless you were in a hurry? The trail meandered closer to the river, a fast-moving torrent of glacial runoff that can swallow a man in seconds. Searchers found a moss-covered rock near the water's edge with what looked like a faint smear of slip, perhaps. Cadaver dogs were browsing. One of them gave a hit on a log jam in the river, barking frantically as though something beneath the water carried a scent. Divers investigated, but the current was brutal. Nothing surfaced. Day after day, they pushed deeper 12 miles of riverbank combed. Helicopters scanning from above, volunteers on the ground shouting his name into the trees, but the forest remained silent. Jacob's family back in Santa Cruz. News of Jacob's disappearance sent shockwaves through his family. His father, Randy, dropped everything and drove north, determined to find his son. He was no stranger to wilderness himself, and refused to believe Jacob had simply vanished without a trace. Friends and relatives arrived in waves, some sleeping in their cars near the trailhead, others joining search parties. The Gray family clung to every clue, every footprint, every rumor, every possible sighting. But as the days stretched into weeks, hope began to fray. The cutback by April 14th. Just over a week after the discovery of the bike, the official search was scaled back. Rangers had to admit what no one wanted to hear. The terrain was too dangerous, the evidence too sparse, and the odds of finding Jacob alive were dwindling. They shifted the case to what's called a limited continuous search, meaning rangers would keep an eye out during routine patrols. But the full-scale manhunt was effectively over. To Jacob's family, this felt like abandonment. Outside rescue teams had offered their help, some even specialized in wilderness disappearances, but their requests were denied. The official stance was simple. The park had done all it could. But to Randy Gray, Jacob's father, that answer wasn't good enough. He wasn't leaving without answers. An ominous, silent summer came, then autumn, then winter. The Olympic National Park moved through its seasons, unbothered by human loss. Tourists came and went. Rain fell endlessly. Fog rolled through the valleys like restless spirits, and Jacob remained missing. The only piece of clothing ever recovered was a pair of shorts, found months later in a nearby area. They matched his size, but DNA testing provided no solid confirmation. To his family, it was another question mark in a case already full of them. Where had Jacob gone? Had he fallen into the river that first night? If so, why hadn't his body surfaced, or had he deliberately walked away, deeper into the forest, seeking something no one else understood? The legend of the Parc the Olympic isn't just wilderness, it's a place of legend. Locals tell stories of people who vanish here, swallowed by the forest as though the trees themselves demand a sacrifice. Some speak of feral humans living deep in the valleys, unseen but watching. Others whisper about the disorienting silence, the way fog can confuse even the best trackers. To Jacob's family, though, these stories weren't myth, they were torment. Somewhere in that maze of forest, they believed, lay their son. Whether alive or dead, he was part of the park now. By the end of 2017, the world had largely moved on. News outlets had stopped reporting. The rangers had returned to their routines. To the public, Jacob Gray was just another name on the long list of people who vanish in America's wildlands. But his family never stopped searching. His father Randy kept returning to the Sole Duck, retracing the steps, staring at the river, listening to the silence. He had one belief, unshakable and raw. The Olympic held his son's story, and one day it would reveal it. The winter storms had passed. By the time the snow melted and the forest floor came alive again with moss, ferns, and dripping canopies, the Olympic National Park looked less like a graveyard and more like a cathedral. It was early May of the following year when the biologists returned to resume their surveys. They weren't looking for him. They weren't looking for anything human at all. Their job was to study elk movement, map wolf packs, and track the fragile balance of life within this untouched wilderness. But nature has a way of hiding secrets until it doesn't anymore. The first sign on the third day of their trek, while following a stream that curved sharply into a ravine, one of the researchers noticed something odd. Among the whetstones, tangled in moss and branches, was a weathered boot. At first, they thought it belonged to a hunter, or maybe an old logger from the days before the forest was protected. But the style was modern. The laces, though frayed, still clung tightly, and inside there were bones. They froze. The silence of the forest pressed in. This wasn't just lost equipment. This was a human. They marked the coordinates, radioed it in, and waited. Within hours, rangers were on their way. And just like that, The man who had vanished from Olympic National Park a year earlier had returned to the world, piece by piece. The unearthing when the search teams arrived. They widened the area. They combed the ridgeline, the ravine, the stream. And what they began to find chilled everyone to the bone. Just 50 yards upstream, a shredded backpack. Still zipped, its straps gnawed through. Its fabric faded from sun and rain. 100 yards further, a jacket snagged on a root, torn sleeve. Mud stiffening its seams. Then the most shocking discovery of all, a small notebook wrapped in plastic. Somehow preserved. Inside, the handwriting was shaky, smudged by water damage, but still legible. His words, his last thoughts. The journal entries. The entries began, normal enough, day 1, day 2. He wrote about the trail, the weather, the way the fog seemed to swallow the mountain whole. But soon, his handwriting grew frantic, his words more scattered, lost the path, tried to backtrack, but the forest keeps changing. Everything looks the same, sunlight barely breaks through the trees. Compass feels useless here. Then later, heard movement at night. Something circling camp. Not sure if cougar or bear. Haven't slept in days. And finally, no one will find me. This place doesn't want me to leave. If anyone ever reads this, tell my family I fought to the end. Those were the last words the notebook contained. The unanswered questions, the discovery sparked more questions than it answered. Why had he strayed so far off the trail? Why hadn't earlier searches found any sign of him when the ravine wasn't impossibly far from where he was last seen? Rangers speculated he had descended looking for water. Others believed he'd been chased by an animal or hallucinating from hunger and exhaustion. Wandered blindly into danger. But the most haunting theory was this, that the forest itself had concealed him, hidden his tracks, cloaked his presence until the exact moment it chose to let him be seen again. Because the Olympic wilderness has done this before, and it will do it again. The family's closure when the belongings were finally returned, his family gathered in silence. His sister read the journal out loud. His father held the waterlogged pages as though they were made of glass. Closure is a strange word. To some, it means an answer. To others, it means an end. For this family, closure meant something in between. Knowing he hadn't simply disappeared without a trace, but also knowing his final days were a lonely, desperate fight. There were tears. But there was also a strange kind of peace. The ranger's reflection, one ranger, who had spent decades searching for the lost in Olympic National Park, said it best, the forest doesn't care about us. It's not cruel, it's not kind, it's just itself. People think they can conquer it, but out here you're a guest. And sometimes the forest doesn't let its guests leave. To this day, hikers still pass near the ravine where his remains were found. Most never know the story. They marvel at the mossy cliffs, the sound of water rushing over stones, the eerie stillness of the fog. But if you know the history, it feels different, heavier. The silence takes on a weight. Some claim they've heard footsteps following them there. Others report feeling watched. And a few have even whispered about a shadow in the mistowees, just out of sight. Whether that's the forest playing tricks, or something else entirely, no one can say. And so, his story joins the countless others written into the soil of Olympic National Park, a place where beauty and danger coexist in perfect balance, a place where you can vanish without warning, and a place where, sometimes, nature itself decides when your story will finally be told. Because, in the end, The forest always remembers